Hello everyone, welcome to Dental Education Hub YouTube channel. Today we are going to discuss the structure of the salivary glands. So what we are going to discuss in this lecture, we will discuss the structure of the salivary gland. And the salivary gland structure, it comprises of numerous components. So we are going to discuss each component briefly. The components of the salivary glands that we are going to discuss, it includes myoepithelial cells, secretory acini, and there are two types of secretory acini, serous and the mucous acini. We will discuss the ductal system, and the first duct is the intercalated duct and striated duct and the excretory duct. All of these structures, they are surrounded by the connective tissue. So we are going to discuss about the connective tissue as well. So this lecture will be a bit lengthy. So watch this lecture till the end and give us your feedback in the comments. So the myoepithelial cells, these cells are the contractile cells and they have a stellate or star-shaped appearance. These cells, they are located between the basal lamina, between the basement membrane and the secretory cells. So you can see in the picture, it is located between the basal lamina and the secretory cells. The myoepithelial cells, mainly they are associated with the secretory cells, but they are also associated with the intercalated ducts as well, as you can see in the picture. In the intercalated duct, there are fewer processes. The processes are very less if you compare it with the secretory cells. So what are the functions of the myoepithelial cells? The first function of the myoepithelial cell is the contraction. And the contraction of the myoepithelial cells, it results in the secretion of the saliva. These cells, they also provide support to the secretory cells, and thus they maintain the shape, structure, and functions of the cells. These cells, the myoepithelial cells, they also produce proteins that have a tumor suppressive activity. Examples of those proteins are proteinase inhibitor and anti-angiogenic factor. So these proteins, they decrease the formation of tumor within the salivary glands. Now, after the myoepithelial cells, we are going to discuss the secretory cells. The secretory cells, they are also known as acini. There are two types of secretory cells based on the type of secretion. So first are the serous cells and second are the mucous cells. So these two types of cells, they differ in structure and they also differ in the type of secretion produced by these cells. Now, the serous cells, they produce secretion that is predominantly, it comprises of proteins and glycoproteins. And these serous cells, they produce secretion which has enzymatic function, antimicrobial function, and calcium binding functions. A small slit-like space known as the intercellular canaliculi, it is sometimes present between the adjacent cells. And these canaliculi, they contain short microvilli. So you can also see in the picture as well that there is a small slit-like space and we call it as intercellular canaliculi that is present in the serous cells. Now the mucous cells. The mucous cells, these cells, they predominantly they produce glycoproteins, and the secretory end piece, it has a tubular structure or tubular configuration as you can see in this picture. The main function of the mucus of the secretion produced by mucous cells is the lubrication, barrier, binding and aggregation of microorganisms. In the mucous cell, there is compression of nucleus against the base of the cell, as you can see in this picture. And Opposite to the serous cells, in the mucous cells, usually there is no intercellular spaces present. Now, there's a structure in the mixed salivary gland, if you remember. In the mixed salivary gland, both type of cells are present. It means the mucous cells as well as serous cells are present. So the serous cells in the mixed salivary gland, they form a special structure known as serous demilune. So the serous demilune, it forms a special arrangement with the mucous cells. So it forms a crescent shaped structure. So the serous cells, they will be covering mucous cells, as you can see in this picture. So the intercellular canaliculi are present in the mucous cells that are associated with the serous demilune. Otherwise, in the mucous cells, there is no slit-like spaces present. Now, we are going to discuss the ductal system. So the first ducts are the intercalated duct. So the intercalated duct, they join the secretory unit of the gland. And by secretory unit, I mean the acinar cells. The intercalated duct, they comprise of simple cuboidal epithelium with centrally placed nucleus, as you can see in this picture. The myoepithelial cells, they are located along the surfaces of these ducts. So what are the functions of this intercalated duct? The intercalated duct, they contribute to the protein component and the fluid component of the saliva. So in addition to the acinar cells, these intercalated duct, they also contribute to the salivary secretion, also transport the saliva from acinar cells to the ductal system and to the main excretory duct. Sometimes undifferentiated stem cells, they are present along with the intercalated ducts, and they provide supply of the new cells in case of any injury or any trauma. And numerous intercalated ducts, they join the striated duct. So the striated ducts, they have columnar shape with centrally placed nucleus. The intercalated duct has a cuboidal appearance, while the striated duct has a columnar appearance with a centrally placed nucleus, as you can see in this picture. So what is the function of the striated duct? The striated duct, it deals with the resorption of the saliva and some secretion of some electrolytes. So it performs both functions, the resorption and secretion of the electrolytes. The surfaces of the membranes, because there's a transportation, there is resorption as well as secretion, so that's why the cell membrane, it is highly infolded, and there are numerous mitochondria. The last duct is the excretory duct, and the excretory duct, finally it opens into the oral cavity. The main identification is these ducts are of the largest diameter. So these cells, the shape of these cells are pseudostratified columnar epithelium, and by pseudostratified we mean there is a single layer, but because the nucleus, they are positioned at different level. For example, this is one cell, this is another cell, this is another columnar cell. So because the nucleus, they are positioned at different levels, so under the microscope it appears like there are numerous layers of cells, but actually there's a single layer of cells. Sometimes small goblet cells, they are present in between these cells, and these goblet cells, small cells, they are present, and these goblet cells, they secrete mucus. Near the opening of the duct, the epithelium of the excretory duct, it is stratified, and it looks like the epithelium of the oral cavity. So all of this gland, it is surrounded by connective tissue. The connective tissue, it comprises of nerve, blood vessels. It's because the salivary gland, it do not have any, and it contain nerves and blood vessels. There are a number of cells that are present within the connective tissue, and these individual cells, they have their own functions. For example, there are fibroblasts, mast cells, macrophages in case of any inflammation. There are adipose cells and plasma cells. The function of plasma cell is very important if you remember the composition of the saliva. So the saliva, it contains an immunoglobulin that is called IgA, and this IgA is secreted by the plasma cells. I hope you found this lecture useful. Please give us your feedback in the comments. Stay blessed.